This is a Louie Tee Network exclusive.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie Tee? Welcome. You are in the lab room, of course. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me on the 2016 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series. Your guide to some of the biggest and hottest names of the 2016 NFL Draft. As you can hear, I got a sore throat, man. But like bad boys in the late 90s, mid 90s, early 2000s, I can't stop, man. So I'm gonna just keep going, power through this sore throat, and give you the content that you yearn for. Give you the content that you came here for. So we on to the next position in the Draft Prospects 101 series. We're talking running backs. And some of these guys showed out at the 2016 NFL Scouting Combine. So I'm gonna jump into these players, break them down, move on to the next position, and keep powering through as many of these draft prospects as we possibly can before we get to the draft. So let's jump into the running back position and talk about the guy that's going to come off the board first. He's the best back in this draft class, no doubt about it, hands down. You know who I'm talking about, man. I'm talking about the Ohio State University. Running back Ezekiel Elliot. Let's jump into his pros and talk about what makes him the best back in this draft class and probably a top 10 choice when it's all said and done at the end of the day in the 2016 NFL Draft. His size at 5'11 plus. We're talking about basically a 6 foot back here, 225 pounds. If you draw it up, I think that's exactly the size you're looking for. Right around 225, 230, at around 5'11 to 6 feet. You just don't get it much better. That's the prototypical size that NFL clubs are looking for when you're talking about a running back. And he's got outstanding feet. That's one of the first pros you notice with him is his ability to be able to cut in the hole, make decisive decisions, get up the field. Tremendous balance and great vision are the next two pros, and I'm gonna go ahead and lump those two in together. And one of my favorite backs as a Redskins fan coming up was Clinton Portis. And Clinton Portis was great in Denver because he had vision, but he also had great balance to see a cutback, hit that cutback, get up the field, and then use his speed to outrun defenders and get into the end zone. That's what led to 2 back-to-back 1,500-yard seasons and that championship belt pose when he was like this in Denver, and which is why the Redskins traded basically straight up. You know, they threw in a second-round pick as well with Champ Bailey along to Denver to get Clinton Portis to Washington when Joe Gibbs came back. And when he got to Washington, he still had the speed, he still had the vision. He just didn't have the balance. And if you don't have tremendous feet, balance, and vision to be able to see all of those things, then it doesn't matter if you can see a cutback if you can't get there. And so balance is important, having tremendous feet, because in order to get to some cutbacks, you're gonna have to make a sharp cut on a dime, and Ezekiel Elliot can do that. Cut back against the grain, get to that cut, so you gotta have the vision to see it. And to me, if you're talking about elite backs, vision is one of the things that you have to have. The best backs in the league have elite vision. If you don't have vision, you'll just run it up in there for a 2-yard gain, even though there was a cutback to the outside where the tackle washed down the defensive end, washed him down the 2 gaps over, and you could have cut back and picked up 11 yards instead. And that's one of the problems with a guy like Alfred Morris. I think he lacks vision. He doesn't see cuts. He doesn't have the ability to make those cuts. And so what generally happens is you get a guy who's going to put his head down, run in the back of his lineman, and pick up 2 yards on a play that could have got you 7 yards, could have got you 8 yards, could have got you 12 yards. So Ezekiel Elliott has the balance, has the vision, has the feet. All of those things coupled together with this next pro gives you the complete package. Home run speed. It's hit hard. It's hit deep. Out of here. Home run speed. 4.47. We saw that at the combine, which allows you to hit a crease and get gone. Be ghost. Find the end zone. And that's one of the biggest things. One of the reasons why the running back position is being devalued as we speak is because there aren't enough guys that can hit a crease and see you later. Okay? A lot of these guys don't have 4.4 speed. A lot of these running backs, the last 5 years, I probably could count on one hand the amount of backs that came into the league as a 3-down back. Keep that in mind. Not scat backs, not 3rd down backs. 3-down backs. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down backs that had sub 4.5 40 speed. I probably could count on one hand. So that's what separates the average backs, the good backs from the great backs, is having the ability to make a team pay. Hit a crease, make a guy miss. You got to be able to make that defender miss in the secondary. Some guys are going to be unblocked. That's another one of those things where if you're an elite back, you got to be able to make guys miss. Because on any given play, some guy isn't going to be accounted for, whether it's the backside defensive end or one of the linebackers comes free. You got to make that guy miss in the backfield sometimes. You're not always going to have plays blocked for 5 yards before you get touched, especially in the NFL. You're going to have to be able to make some guys miss, and Ezekiel Elliot can do that. And he's got the ability, once he hits that second level, to get to the end zone with that breakaway 4.47 speed. We saw it in the playoff game 2 years ago, and we saw it all throughout his career at Ohio State. But I thought the best example of that was you could go to 2014 in the Big Ten championship game versus Wisconsin, breakaway run for a touchdown in that game. You could go to the playoff game versus Alabama, huge 90-some-odd run, 87-yard run for a touchdown down the sideline. He's got breakaway speed, and you saw it at the combine, and that's something that allows him to kind of separate himself from the rest of the big-name backs in this draft. Can run with power, speed, or finesse. And sometimes we use finesse like it's a dirty word. No, especially for a running back. If you're a finesse back, that means you can't run it up in there between the tackles. That's not what Ezekiel Elliott is about. He can run it with power between the tackles. 3rd and 1, put him in the game, he'll get you 2. You need him to run with some speed. Speed! He can get to the outside, bounce it outside, make a defender miss, and then off to the races, beat the safety's angle, get into the end zone. Or he can run with finesse. He's a guy that will jump cut, make a guy miss, split the safety and the linebacker, and get into the end zone. So he can do all of those things. You go look at the Oregon championship game from 2014. Beautiful example of that. He jump cuts in the hole, cuts back yet again, makes the linebacker miss, then splits the safety and a linebacker who's trying to get him in heavy pursuit and gets into the end zone for a touchdown. That's the type of finesse that he has in addition to the speed and the power that he runs with. So you get all of that, all encompassing in one package. And so that's why this guy has been talked about as a top 10 back. Picks his feet up in traffic. And this is another big thing for me. One of my biggest pet peeves of running backs is when guys get into a hole, get a crease, they don't pick their feet up, and some guy behind them makes one last ditch effort, one feeble attempt, one last ditch effort to get the running back on the ground. Dives at his feet, and if you don't pick your feet up, guess what he's gonna do? He's gonna clip the back of your heel, you're gonna trip, hit the ground, and you're gonna fall. Pick your feet up. Ezekiel Elliott does that, and I'm so elated to see a guy pick his feet up. One play, a guy tried to get him from behind, he picked his feet up, and he hit his shoe, but he couldn't get him down because he picked his feet up enough to where his foot came down, but it didn't clip the grass, it didn't clip the turf, which is what usually makes these guys fall, is when a guy clips the back of your ankle, it either hits your other foot, you trip, or it hits the ground and you trip. Well, he picked his foot up enough to the point where the guy hit his ankle, but it knocked his shoe off. It didn't knock him off balance. He kept running, picked up another 20 yards without one of his shoes. That's what I mean by picking up your feet, especially when you're in the hole and you get a crease. Guys are going to try to dive at your legs because they know they can't catch up to you. They don't have the type of speed that you have. So they're going to try to dive at your legs pick your feet up, and get everything that's there. And Ezekiel Elliot does that. He can get skinny, and that's another lost art with some of these backs is sometimes you got to be able to fit through a crease that's not really that big, not really there. You got to be able to get skinny, turn your body sideways, squeeze through a little crease and get through the other side. Sometimes that's the difference between getting out of the first wave and into the second wave and just getting tackled for a 3-yard gain. Is the ability to get skinny, find the smallest of creases and crevices, get through it and get to the second wave and have a chance to make a big play. I saw him do that a number of times at Ohio State University, and so he's one of those guys that can get skinny, turn sideways at the line of scrimmage, and find a way to squeeze through a crease that maybe a multitude of backs wouldn't be able to get to. Runs behind his pads, that's huge, okay? For a guy that's right around 6 feet, you gotta run behind your pads, because if you don't, you're gonna get blown up, you're gonna go backwards when you run. You wanna run through contact and go forward with a forward lean. He runs behind his pads, so he gets the extra yardage that's there. Speaking of which, yak. He's definitely a yak runner. And if you're gonna be in the top 10 of the draft, you gotta be a yak runner. Of course, yak being yards after contact. When he gets hit, he powers through, and that's where that running behind your pads comes into play. He powers through the contact and gets the yardage that's there. So again, another big pro for a guy that has so many different talents that's going to allow him to be selected probably in the top 10 of this upcoming draft. Can catch the football out of the backfield. Now, that's a pro and a con for him. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I feel confident that if you throw him the football, he's going to catch it 8 times out of 10. So he can catch it out of the backfield as well. So that's why he's a 3-down player. That in conjunction with this last pro, he's physical in pass pro. He's not afraid to stick his nose in the face of a blitzing backer. He's not afraid to go and chip. And you see this on tape with him all the time. He's releasing to a route. He'll chip that defensive end. He doesn't even have to do that. He just says, hey, I'm on my way out to run this out route. Why not jack up the defensive end in his ribs? And I'm going to tell you right now, defensive ends hate when running backs come and hit them in their ribs where they're exposed, because they're up the field, they're trying to rush, they got their hands on the tackle, and here comes a back out of nowhere, boom, hitting them right in their ribs when they're exposed. They hate that more than anything, and what that does is it plays a psychological game with them. Now all of a sudden, they're looking around. They're not worried as much about rushing up the field as they are looking around to see if somebody's coming to chip them and hit them in their ribs. So Ezekiel Elliott will come in, be physical in pass pro, stand up, put his nose in a guard, in a tackle, in a defensive end, in a linebacker's chest, and block them. Really love that facet of his game as well. You go to his cons. It's not all dancing fairies and sugar plums with Ezekiel Elliott. And again, some of these things I'm talking about with these cons, I'm nitpicking, folks. I don't have a lot, okay? But there are some things that he can improve upon. He will drop the football occasionally out of the backfield. Now, if you watch the combine, and I actually told you this in my combine coverage, day 1 of the NFL scouting combine, I told you that he didn't catch the football all that well. He's not a natural hands catcher. I don't think. That doesn't mean he can't catch the football, because I still feel confident that if you throw it to him, he'll catch it. It's just that he's not one of these guys that's snatching a football out of the air. His hands aren't soft. They're not natural. He's not one of those guys that you just like a Le'Veon Bell where you're like, man, his hands are feathery soft. You throw it anywhere in his general vicinity and he's going to pull it down. I don't think that's Ezekiel Elliott. And my best example is in 2014, they're playing against Wisconsin. Now, I believe it was 14. It may have been 15, but I believe it was 14. And they're playing against Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. He's wide open in the flats. And yeah, Cardale Jones, it was 14 because Cardale Jones threw him the pass. Cardale Jones could have thrown a much more catchable football, but it was a football that should have been caught. And he's out in the flats. It's a walk-in touchdown. They're literally at the 3-yard line. He sneaks into the flats. He's wide open. If he catches it, he'll turn up the field and he can literally walk in the field into the touchdown, into the end zone. And he stretches out for the football, tips right off his hands. And I saw that at the combine. And so that's one of those things with him where don't be surprised if on 1st and 10, you check it down to him out of the flat on a flare route, and it skips off his hands. It may happen. I don't see it happening all the time, but it can and it will happen from time to time. He doesn't cut his losses. That's the next con. Sometimes you just gotta know when to say when. Like me right now, probably shouldn't be doing this video. You should know when to say when. But he doesn't, just like Ezekiel Elliot, I don't know when to say when. He doesn't know how to say when. And sometimes you gotta play where you just need to stick your head down and get a yard, or just get back to the line of scrimmage and say, all right, I'm gonna cut my losses. He's the type of guy, he'll stiff arm that first defender, loop backwards 4 yards, and try to get back to the line of scrimmage. Well, had you just put your head down and got back to the line of scrimmage the first time, you wouldn't have ended up with a 2-yard loss. So he's one of those guys that always thinks he can make a play. I can still get to the outside. Even though there's 3 defenders chasing me, I can still get to the outside and find a way to salvage this play. Especially not at the next level. He's not gonna be able to do that. So I'm hoping he'll be able to realize, look, I gotta cut my losses, get what I can get, and move on to the next play. So that's something I also think he needs to work on, cutting his losses. And my last con is really me I'm nitpicking here, folks, okay? He could exhibit a tad bit more patience as a runner. Sometimes I feel like he gets the football and there may be a couple of blockers in front of him and he's like, you guys are moving too slow, I'm gonna go ahead and take off. And I'm like, if you just would have waited, set up a block or two, maybe you could have sprung this one and had an even bigger game. But again, I'm nitpicking because he doesn't do that all the time. And he can be patient at times with the football. So I don't want to really overblow that one. But I did see that a couple of times, a couple of blockers pulling from the other side of the field. And instead of him waiting and allowing those blocks to develop, he takes off. Guy ends up clipping him down at the legs. If he'd allowed one of those offensive linemen to get in front of that guy, he may have been able to spring that for a much bigger gain. So those are some of the cons I see with him. It's not a lot. When you're in the top 10 discussion as a running back, there's not a lot to chew on in terms of cons. That's why you're going in the top 10. You got to be special to go in the top 10 as a running back, or at least perceived as special, because we saw Trent Richardson go in the top 5, and we all know what his situation ended up being. So you got to be perceived as special. He's not Trent Richardson, nothing of the sort. He's going to be just fine. He's going to be an elite back, I think. And so Zeke Elliott looks like a top 10 pick after his performance at the Combine. I expect him to light his pro day up. I think he's got all the tape that you need to see, all the evidence that points to him being a top 10 pick in the 2016 NFL Draft. That's Ezekiel Elliott's Draft Prospects 101 breakdown. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the Lab Room. Come back and join me as I continue to break down anything and everything in the National Football League. I told you, we're going to power through this sore throat, man. No days off. See you next time.
There's plenty more where that came from. While you're here, subscribe to the channel. If you want more Louie Tee, be sure to follow me on Twitter at In The Lab Room, or you can like the Facebook page at In The Lab Room. That's In The Lab Room on Facebook and at In The Lab Room on Twitter. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.